We're at the Greenfield Village, part of the Henry Ford Museum Complex, where there's a museum, and also you could take a tour of the Ford truck factory, which we have planned for tomorrow. I heard that Henry Ford was quite a collector.
Anything else I look at, or go back out?
The steam engine tractor.
Steam, much more efficient than the animal operated treadmills. Horsepower. Interesting that they used soybean oil for paint. Interesting. So you match the number on each item here to this plaque. That one I know, a hoe. Wow, a lot of machinery. So let's see here. This is 32. What does this do? 32 is a hay loader. Okay, on the opposite side is a Wagon Shop. Local farmers, this was a convenient one-stop repair shop for their vehicles, tools, and equipment. This was a place for people to get almost anything wooden repaired. Built in 1847 in Macon, Michigan.
Brought in their chairs.
Yeah, I'm going back there anyway. We can get one at the shower. Alright.
Interesting background of Henry Ford. More interested in machinery than the farm work. And his mother helped him out in that interest. So this house is exactly the way he remembers it.
Exactly as it did from his memory the day she passed away when she never left. So everything was put here by him. It's part of his own personal collection. And we don't move it because we would get in trouble. You're more than welcome to, oh sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt if you were going to ask a question. To look around, take your time in the front half of the house. me know if you have questions. And when you're ready, if you exit the store and turn right, you will be able to see the dining room and the kitchen as well. It's just, according to modern fire code, there needs to be 2 exits. And we don't want to add an ugly, like, scaffolding kind of situation to the original structure.
Oh, Henry Ford was born in this house?
Yes.
Oh, wow. And how old was he when he left this house?
It kind of depends on who you're asking, or not who you're asking, but the time period. At 16 years old, he went to the city of Detroit and he started to find, he would find a new job every few months because that was his college to him. He would learn a new skill, a new trade, and then once he thought he had mastered it, he'd go on to the next. So he did that for about 3 years, and then like all 19-year-olds to ever exist, he felt like he knew everything there was to know. So he came back home for a little while, and then in his early 20s, he actually went to go work for the Detroit branch of the Edison Illuminating Company, where he met Thomas Edison.
Oh, wow.
And he was another one of, along with his mother, Edison was another very encouraging figure in his life. But it wasn't until Henry Ford was 40 years old he founded the Ford Motor Company.
Wow,
So,
40 years old.
Yeah,
Wow.
he was very, very fond of if you make a mistake or if you fail the first time or the second time or the third time, there's always another 4th time you could try. And
Yes.
that 4th time worked for him. It's a really good lesson, I think.
That's an
for my
awesome
life.
story.
Yeah. I think it's encouraging. Sometimes I'm only 22 years old. I'm like, wow, I haven't done anything with my life. And then I'm like, oh, Henry became a billionaire at 40. I have time.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, I probably was making a funny face. I didn't know there
Oh,
was.
I didn't. I was trying to get him out. I was trying to scoot over a little bit. Is all.
Well, thank you for that information
Yeah,
there.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then I'm not sure if. Oh yeah, you did hear. If you go this way, the dining room and the kitchen are open as well.
Nice. Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, there was no central heat and air back then.
Corner cabinet.
Doesn't look much different than Abraham Lincoln's kitchen.
There's a water pump.
Ah, good observation. And what's that thing right there in the corner there
Butter churn.
for butter? Pretty pretty plates and bowls and stuff there.
Oh yes, you're right.
Gas lighting. No electric back then.
Probably just oil. You probably have oil in the bottom with a wick.
Oh yes. Very interesting. So even the copper guttering, look at that. Wow. How come it doesn't have the patina, I wonder? Well, it's got a little bit up there, but you would think the whole thing would be greenish. Maybe they
Newer.
replace it more
Roof
often.
looks newer.
Yeah. Here we are on Main Street. A her shed, wow. Let's go see if we could buy a Ford. Interesting. After 2 failed attempts, Henry Ford succeeded in the automotive business with Ford Motor Company. This building is modeled after the company's first factory. This replica is 1/4 the size of the original building.
This car came off the line in 1927. They were building close to 1.5 million cars a year. 50% of cars in the field were operating in the West were Model Ts. And they referred to as a car that could build a lot of wheels and transform and make it live. All that was achieved from 1903, creating 3 things that did not exist when we started the company. And he had to create all of it. And so that's, to me, that's the thing that's fascinating about it. Having that vision and sticking with it.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go out this way.
Yes.
You can
He's
go out
gonna,
there.
he's
Yeah.
gonna pull out the
You
scooter around.
do the company. Oh, you can park here.
Yeah, there's parking back here.
Oh, okay.
So that way you can use it to get around
Yeah.
and narrow, because it's 888 acres.
Can
One-
you, can you use this multiple times for
Yeah,
cars?
it's
and
cars
all?
and buses and
No
trains
parking
as
side.
much as you want.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yourself, sir?
Fine.
15 million Ford.
Yeah, that was 1927. It's more or less the ceremonial end of the Model T era, because reality is they had 30 assembly plants around the world, and if they were still building cars in Buenos Aires after this, so be it. So we don't know how many would have been down there or anything else. But this marked the official end of the Model T era. And it ran from 1908 to 1927. Now, to put this in perspective for you, what that 15 million, like if you watch the news today and they hear about the car market and you go, oh, billion, sales are down to 1.5 billion this year for the total car market. And you go, where does 15 million fit in? If you did a Google search today for the best-selling cars in American history, this would still rank in the top 10, even though it's been out of production for more
No
than
kidding.
close to
Wow.
100 years.
And this is the Model T.
T. Now, compare that to the Ford Mustang, which was launched in 1964. It's been in continuous production for more than 50 years. And 2 years ago, they finally got to 10 million cars after 50 years. And when he started with the Model T, the mass assembly, the automated assembly plant, the mass production did not exist. The market for this car was just beginning. Nobody knew. When he said he was going to build 300,000 cars a year, everybody said he was nuts, because
Oh, wow.
who would buy that many cars?
Yeah.
And so the market didn't exist, the means of producing it didn't exist, and they achieved all 15 million in just 19 years. Wow. That's, so you're basically starting from scratch to create that. And his perception of it was also different. He looked at this as being a tool, because Henry Ford grew up on a farm. Show you how different perspectives, a lot of it is unintended consequences, the way it evolves and everything else there. So what city do you live in?
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
All right, so picture Tulsa. How far is it from Oklahoma City?
About 100 miles.
All right, so before this car came along, 1900, you live in Tulsa, and you got to go to Oklahoma City. Horse-drawn carriage. It'll take you roughly 10 days.
10 days.
Because the furthest you could travel in a single day, well, Oklahoma might be a little bit faster because there's no obstacles. It's just flat. No. I know Tulsa has hills. But you know, the horse-drawn carriage would only travel about a mile or two a day, and then you'd have to rest after about 10 hours, and to feed them, let them rest, and everything. If you really pushed it, you might be able to get to somewhere between 15 and 20 if it was the summer and you got it started
For a longer day.
from dawn to dark.
Yeah.
You just kept pushing it, but it wasn't going to be much further than that, and it would have to be if you're going across rivers or if you have any terrain issues or anything else like that. But on average, they say it was about 10 or 11 miles a day. And in fact, your day-to-day life would have been about, most people spent their entire life within a 10-mile radius of where they were born. Your day-to-day life would be about five miles. Because that's the furthest you could travel and get back all in the same day.
Yes.
So what had happened when this car came along, Henry Ford was looking at it because in 1900, Tulsa was basically all rural.
Yeah.
You know, you got outside Main Street, and next thing you know, you're out dirt roads and not even roads. It's just
Right.
trails. So he grew up on a farm. He did not particularly like farming, and he built this as a tool to make life easier for farmers. Because one of the things, like there were steam engines and there were big powerful engines that farmers could use, but they weren't mobile because they were so heavy they just sink down into the dirt.
Yeah.
So a lot of like our thrasher here, when they use it, it has to be pulled by horses because you couldn't pull it through the dirt. You know, the horses. That's why our horses here, they'll pull it out for work when we harvest our winter wheat. They'll pull it out, go through the thrashing, and they have it hooked up to a team of horses and everything else. Henry Ford wanted to give people a tool that they could use to make life easier for the farm. So now you're not restricted to that 5 mile. You could, in fact, one of the ways he got financing for his company is Lansing's about 68 miles from here, Lansing, Michigan. And the guy said, Henry Ford built a car, and he looked at him and said, if you can get me to Lansing and back in a single day, I'll get you your financing.
Oh man.
So they loaded the car in Detroit, drove up to Lansing, got back, and the guy said, I'll get you all the money you need.
Oh wow.
Because that was unheard of.
He
It
saw
was
the future.
Personal transportation.
Yes.
And they still weren't sure what that was going to entail because, that was, they look at it.
Life changed dramatically.
So like when they talk about it being black and everything else like this, well, he looked at it as a tool. The color doesn't matter to what color your hammer is. A hammer is a hammer.
Right.
It's a tool, right?
Exactly.
And that's what he looked at this car as. It's just there to make.
But
your
this
life-
one's green.
Yeah, I know. He went back to colors. Originally, the color. People have this misconception that he wouldn't change. But from his perspective, this car was a tool, and you don't change. Why do you need to change it? If it's effective, it's working. So, picture this: 1925. There's something like 50 car companies in the U.S. He's building close to 2 million cars a year, and 50% of the cars on the road in the U.S. are Model Ts.
Wow.
And people are coming up to him and saying, you need to change your car. Now, this is the guy when he formed the company in 1903 and said, I'm going to build a car for the average person. They said, you're going to fail. Because who's the average person? They don't buy things. And they were right. The consumer market we know of today did not exist. There were hundreds of car companies in the U.S., but they were all being built for the very wealthy. Nobody even knew who the average, in fact, the example I give to people is if I came to your house in 1980 and told you, I'm going to rip your phone out of the wall and I'm going to give you this thing to carry around with you all day.
What the hell am I going to do with that?
Exactly. So if I came to you in 1908 and said, I'm going to take away your horse-drawn carriage and give you one of these things, you're going to look at him and go, are you nuts? why do I need that?
Yeah.
And so all that began to change. And so that was kind of the thing, you know, with the Model T, that transformation. That's why they refer to it as the world. He put the world on wheels and transformed the way we live. And we went from just, you know, you're going to see as you go through the village here examples of that transformation. But one of them you won't see is, and this is the best example, like I said, Henry Ford, it was to enable that farmer to drive 10 miles and get back home, maybe 15. Or if you're out here, drive all the way to downtown Detroit, spend the day and come back home. You know, that's, you know, but he still thought of us as a rural country. The story that really gives you an indication that where Henry Ford was caught off guard, and even the people in the United States didn't know of it, didn't realize it at the time. Not too far from here is a high school, and it was in the city of Fortson, which is now the city of Dearborn. But in fact, they just celebrated their 100th anniversary of Fortson High School.
Wow.
They broke ground for the first multi-million-dollar high school in the United States. And they went to Henry Ford and asked him for advice on how to design it. The only reason I know this stuff is I graduated from it. And I was not in the first graduating class. Mine came a little later. So they came here, and Henry Ford's first question was, you know, I'd be glad to help, but why are you building a school that big? Because throughout the country, education was in a one-room schoolhouse. Or if you were in a city like Detroit, there might be a public school 2 or 3 stories high with 300 students from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. Those 300, because everything had to be in walking distance.
Yes.
So you built your school. If you were in a densely populated city, you could build schools everywhere, you know, for those kids. And so he looked at, why are you building a school this big? And the people, from the city of Fortson looked and said, like he was nuts. And he said, see that down the street, that plant you opened? It employs 75,000 people. And they're all moving out here.
Uh-huh.
For the first time, up until then, Henry Ford thought people that were working in his plants were just saving enough money to move back to the country. It was the first time he realized they were making careers out of it. And when doing so, first time anybody thought of it in this context, you could use your personal transportation to live in one city, commute to another to work, and come back home all in the same day.
Yes.
So everything we know of as far as suburbia, urban sprawl, think of businesses. Businesses, factories, and that were all in the factories because they needed to be near population centers where people could move to. Now you could go out to where Henry Ford came out here because the property was cheap, and these people had a means of getting to and from work.
Only paying $5 a day, right, where everybody else is paying $2.
Well, that was in the 19th. True. But if you look at the sign, there's a poster right there. One of the things that was distinctive about Ford Motor Company, when he started that $5 workday, there were people